It's Nolan. Now, before we get started, make sure y'all hitting that like button. Make sure y'all sharing it on your respective platforms. Let somebody know what we're doing today. Now, let's get into the show.
I said I'm A-Town finest, so put my game down, grinding. Was on them Greyhounds trying to get out of state. My assignment was hit the stage at a college, encourage kids they could do it. Told them how to reach greatness, some days you must be secluded. On my own shit, hang up the phone shit, they on some clown shit. I'm David, I stay with a stone for cracking your dome with. Play me, I come to your home and ring your alarm. Bitch, I'm crazy, this ain't just a song. Quit raising your tone, prick. I'm that nigga, that number one spot, nobody can't top. I ain't even got dropped though. Big dog gon' run in my block, got the blade on chop, beat nigga like Nacho. Rent do nigga sell like rock, move bass, I not do me like Rocco. Spend a bitch, she say I'm guapo. No money, I say no hablo, no English. My screenplay, try to get stretched out like Bengay. Don't call me, let you and your friend on the line, try to put it on three-way. I'm Green Bay, I'm about my cheese, nigga run up the check like relay. Got leeway, I flip my style like I'm a lucha libre.
What's going on, beautiful people? It's the kid J Nolan here. Welcome back to another episode of Inside the Industry, your number one source for music, entertainment, commentary, and breakdowns. Hope everyone's doing well this afternoon. Of course, y'all clicked on this video, so we know what we're about to get into is Megan Thee Stallion and her reply to Milagro Gramz. They've been having an ongoing legal battle, of course. Megan Thee Stallion has a civil lawsuit against Milagro Gramz for harassment, defamation, and spreading of deepfake pornography. Milagro Gramz feels like she's been coming to the net expressing her opinion, right? She doesn't feel like she's connected to Tory Lanez in any other way. Just coincidental that she happens to be cool with his family. And Megan is saying, nah, baby, I'm on your ass. I just got that restraining order approved on Tory Lanez, which included your name in it. So let me circle back on you before everything is, move forward beyond the deadline. So today we're going to go through Megan's latest filing in her response, because the last time we talked, Milagro was filing for Megan's lawsuit to be dismissed. We've got Megan's reply. Let's go ahead and pull it up. Okay. So here we are. This is page 1 of 22, United States District Court, Southern District of Florida. Megan Pete, an individual plaintiff versus Milagro Elizabeth Cooper, defendant. This is plaintiff Megan Pete's opposition to defendant Milagro Elizabeth Cooper's motion to dismiss. This is the preliminary statement. They say Megan Pete brought this action to end the onslaught of malicious and defamatory lies defendant Milagro Cooper has proliferated across the internet through her social media accounts, and to recover for the damage that defendant has caused to Miss Pete's personal and professional reputation. As alleged in the first amended complaint, ECF number 28, defendant has undertaken a smear campaign in apparent coordination with Daystar Peterson, aka Tory Lanez, a convicted felon who violently shot Miss Pete. With Mr. Peterson behind bars and now recently subject to a court-ordered restraining order, defendant is doing his bidding by telling the world that Miss Pete lied about him shooting her and defaming Miss Pete not only as a liar and perjurer, but as someone who is mentally incapacitated, in need of guardianship, and suffering from alcoholism, right? And these are all things that can be cited in Milagro Gramz tweets, her recordings, and so forth, which Megan has already detailed in multiple filings, multiple statements and filings of discovery. So everything that Milagro's been doing for years has been documented. A lot of it is in the lawsuit itself. So I don't think, I mean, let me not think. Let me just continue, right? But calling her a perjurer on the stand is crazy when she never actually was convicted for perjury or charged for it. They say, worse still, defendant has taken other despicable measures to intimidate, harass, and cause injury to Miss Pete, such as by promoting an artificial pornographic video falsely depicting Miss Pete in sexual activity. This case is not about the right to express opinions on a criminal trial or a plaintiff's attempt to silence opinions she disagrees with, despite what the motion to dismiss would have the court believe, ECF number 30. Instead, it is about a malicious smear campaign undertaken for the sole purpose of harming Miss Pete in retaliation for her defiance of a violent criminal. They using their words. Plaintiff agrees that anyone in America is entitled to comment on public trials. Plaintiff does not agree, though, that this country permits repeatedly and falsely accusing a crime victim of giving perjurious testimony under oath about whether her assailant shot her. Indeed, it is Hornbook law that it is a defamatory assertion of fact, not a non-actionable opinion or hyperbole to make such assertions. Yet defendant's motion cynically pretends as if in trials rarely is there something that is absolutely true, so she must have carte blanche to call Miss Pete a liar. Moat at 6. The post-truth world defendant thinks she lives in is not reality. Whether Mr. Peterson shot Miss Pete is verifiable. Whether Miss Pete told the truth about the shooting was verified by a unanimous jury verdict. Defendant has made false assertions of fact, and the First Amendment does not protect her malicious speech. Very interesting that they mentioned post-truth world. That's interesting. For the reasons discussed below, the First Amendment complaint states a claim for each cause of action in which Ms. Pete seeks to recover. Defendant's motion should be denied. Okay, statement of facts. Plaintiff Megan Pete is a performing artist known as Megan Thee Stallion. First Amendment complaint, FAC ECF number 28. Defendant Milagro Elizabeth Cooper is a social media personality that owns and operates various social media accounts with over 100,000 followers. We've gone over this before. Defendant has publicly admitted that she is not a journalist. Daystar Peterson is a performing artist known as Tory Lanez. So they're going to take you back in time. And for anybody that doesn't like going back in time, revisiting July 12, 2020 in Megan's filings, what are you here for? Because had that never occurred, none of this would have ensued afterwards, right? And Milagro, for whatever reason, she's still hell-bent on this not being the case. Tory Lanez fans have still been hell-bent on the facts of the evening not being in their favor, so they try to stretch the truth or use what they used earlier, post-truths, to navigate their argument. So we're going to have to just go through it. I know y'all don't like being faced with this information because y'all look at other information and try to overshadow what actually happened and why he's locked up. But we'll continue. On the evening of July 12, 2020, Mr. Peterson shot Miss Pete with a gun, causing her to suffer injuries to her feet, necessitating medical treatment. The Los Angeles County District Attorney's Office later indicted Mr. Peterson on charges of felony assault with a semi-automatic firearm. His trial began on December 12, 2022. Ms. Pete testified that Mr. Peterson shot her. On December 23, 2022, the jury returned a unanimous guilty verdict, finding Mr. Peterson guilty of all 3 felony charges brought against him. Mr. Peterson is currently serving a 10-year prison sentence in California. Throughout the trial and to the present, defendant has engaged in a campaign of harassment against Ms. Pete based on defendant's conspirational relationship with Mr. Peterson and his father, the Petersons. Defendant's smear campaign includes spreading false and disproven theories that Mr. Peterson did not shoot Ms. Pete and that Ms. Pete did not suffer gunshot wounds as a result. Based on her conspirational relationship with the Petersons, defendant made a series of repeated defamatory statements against Ms. Pete that 1. Accused Ms. Pete of lying under oath and perjuring herself at the trial. 2. Falsely claimed Ms. Pete is legally retarded, that is a quote, and requires a guardian. Condemn Ms. Pete as an alcoholic. Defendant's defamatory statements are false statements of fact reasonably understood to attribute to Ms. Pete the action or conduct described therein. Defendant knew or should have known that these statements were false. For example, defendant admitted that evidence from the trial that she claimed had gone missing was in fact in the police's possession. Defendant spread her defamatory statements out of a disdain for Ms. Pete as a means to gain notoriety and due to a financial incentive from the Petersons. And of course, they've already shown track record of financial incentives being exchanged. In addition to her defamatory statements, defendant promoted an altered sexual depiction of Miss Pete deep fake video. On June 8th, 2024, defendant liked an ex post that featured the deep fake video. Liking the post, the video became displayed on defendant's ex account's likes page, which tracked and displayed liked posts for other users to see. That same day, defendant made an ex post that directed and encouraged her social media followers to go to my likes so that they could see the deepfake video. Defendant confirmed that she drew attention to the deepfake video and told her followers to view it, which caused the deepfake video to gain popularity. Legal standard. To survive a federal rule of Civil Procedure 12b-6 motion to dismiss, a complaint must contain sufficient factual matter accepted as true to state a claim to relief that is plausible on its face. A pleading withstands a motion to dismiss if it alleges factual content that allows the court to draw the reasonable inference that the defendant is liable for the misconduct alleged. When considering a motion to dismiss, a court must construe the complaint in the light most favorable to the plaintiff and take the factual allegations as true. Argument. Ms. Pete states a claim for defamation. Okay, this is Florida Statute 770-01, does not apply because Milagro is not a media defendant. Okay, they say Section 770-01, Florida statutes requires pre-suit notice and defamation actions against media defendants. Defendant has admitted to not being a media defendant, stating definitively she is not a journalist. Okay, so you can't use the media as your shield because you've come out of your own mouth and stated that you're not a journalist. And this is something that YouTubers definitely need to take heed to. This may not be this could very well be a statute in other states, but I don't know that to be true. But a lot of us come on here and say we're not journalists, we're expressing our opinion, or we're just commentators giving commentary on things. But sometimes people do take it extremely far with the opinion, with the allegations that can sometimes tread into territory of defamation. So in those cases, if somebody opens up, a lawsuit on you, you may not be protected by this media, because you openly say you're not a journalist. And it looks like it's coming back to kick Milagro in the tail if the courts see this as fact. Okay. As a result, that section does not apply to this case. Defendant has the burden to show that she is a media defendant, and her one paragraph argument fails to do so. The statute requires notice only where the case involves a publication or broadcast of libel or slander in a newspaper, periodical, or other medium. Florida courts have consistently interpreted Section 770-01 to apply only to news media, i.e. the press. The statute's other medium language is limited to news media defendants who publish statements via an other medium and does not expand the reach of the statute beyond the news media. Thus, every Florida court that has considered the question has concluded that the pre-suit notice requirement applies only to media defendants, not private individuals. Okay? In general, media defendants are those individuals engaged in the dissemination of news and information through the news and broadcast media. A court's focus remains on the content of the digital publication and the central issue of whether it could be likened to the kind of content newspapers, broadcasters, and periodicals publish, whether in print or online, because that is all that Section 770.01 and 02 encompass. Defendant has the burden to demonstrate she is a media defendant. Okay? She fails to point to any allegations that support her conclusory assertion that she is a social media blogger who regularly live streams and posts about current topics, including celebrities and the hip-hop community, which is insufficient to show she is a media defendant in any event. While she cites to paragraph 12 of the FAC, nothing in that allegation supports that claim. Because defendant has failed to meet her burden, the court should reject this argument. So it looks like she was trying to use that as a defense. They're saying, nah, you've contradicted yourself multiple times on whether or not you were a media member. Moreover, nothing in the FAC is sufficient to support a finding on a motion to dismiss that defendant's social media channels are akin to news media, and the FAC's allegations show that defendant is in fact not a media defendant. The FAC alleges that defendant is a social media personality who has publicly admitted that she is not a journalist and she is therefore a private individual rather than a media defendant. The FAC also contains extensive allegations that defendant is a hired gun for Mr. Peterson and has conspired with the Petersons to use her social media accounts to execute a widespread campaign to maliciously injure Miss Pete's reputation and inflict severe emotional distress upon her in retaliation for her testimony regarding Mr. Peterson's unlawful act of gun violence against her. Allegations that defendant used her social media accounts to harm Miss Pete are sufficient to defeat her unsubstantiated contention that she is a media defendant. Okay? Statute does not apply to individuals who publish website for the purpose of harming someone's reputation. Plaintiff's authorities are inapposite, and distinguishable in any event. Defendant mischaracterizes this example as involving a blogger with a YouTube channel, but it actually was about a WordPress blog, not a YouTube channel. See how the specifics change these things up? That case was an appeal from a decision on a summary judgment record, not to dismiss a motion, or a motion to dismiss, That record included testimony that the defendant founded the blog entitled Public Intellectual in order to publicly comment on issues of public concern in an intellectual manner, which is absent here. Oh, love the subtle shade. Speaking on things of public concern in an intellectual manner, which is absent because you're speaking not intelligently. And the court was careful to note that it was not prepared to say that all blogs and all bloggers would qualify for protection of Section 770.01. Likewise, in Girl Power LLC versus Rodriguez, the court found the defendant YouTube blogger to be a media defendant primarily because there was no indication that she is editorializing on behalf of a client. The term media defendant applies to those who editorialize as to matters of public interest without being commissioned to do so by their clients. Here, however, Ms. Pete alleges that the defendant conducted her campaign of harassment as a paid surrogate of Mr. Peterson, who is still on Mr. Peterson's payroll. In other words, to the extent defendant argues she engages in editorializing, she does so on behalf of a commissioning client, Mr. Peterson, removing her from the realm of disinterested and neutral commentary or editorializing reserved for media defendants. Simply put, defendant is a malicious actor, not a legitimate news media outlet entitled to the to the protections of Section 770.01, and her motion under that section should be denied. Okay? Next up, defendant statements are not opinions or rhetorical hyperbole. And rhetorical hyperbole is an interesting phrase within itself. The FAC alleges that defendant maliciously published numerous false assertions of a factual nature designed to destroy Ms. Pete's reputation. Defendant's attempts to cast her numerous false assertions of fact as mere opinions and rhetorical hyperbole do not square with the law of defamation, where a court first determines the statements are susceptible to a defamatory interpretation. Factual questions arise that should be resolved by the trier of fact. If the statement is revealed to be confusing or ambiguous, raising the question of whether readers might have read it in a defamatory way, a jury question is presented. Where a reasonable jury could conclude plaintiff was defamed, dismissal is inappropriate. Okay? An opinion, unlike a statement of fact, is incapable of the quality of truth or falsity from Duffy v. Fox News Network. However, a statement that, although ostensibly in the form of an opinion, implies the allegation of undisclosed defamatory facts as the basis for the opinion is actionable. Thus, a mixed expression of opinion is not constitutionally protected. Further, where the speaker or writer neglects to provide the audience with an adequate factual foundation prior to engaging in the offending discourse, liability may arise. Even if the speaker states the facts upon which he bases his opinion, if those facts are either incorrect or incomplete, or if his assessment of them is erroneous, the statement may still imply a false assertion of fact. Simply couching such statements in terms of opinion does not dispel these implications. Where the court finds that the statement in question is of mixed opinion in fact and reasonably capable of defamatory interpretation, then a jury issue is presented. A defendant contending that her statements are rhetorical hyperbole must demonstrate that the alleged defamatory statements are the sort of loose, figurative language that no reasonable person would believe presented facts. And we all know, if you've ever heard Milagro speak, she presents her opinions as facts. And as for the people that hate her or love her, you know the tone of her voice. She presents opinions as facts. Okay? Defamatory statements accusing Ms. Pete of lying under oath are false assertions of fact. Defendant's defamatory statements asserting that Ms. Pete lied under oath when she testified that Mr. Peterson shot her are false assertions of fact. Mr. Peterson was tried and convicted for the crime of shooting Ms. Pete. Defendant's contention that her statements are non-actionable opinions because plaintiff's testimony at trial cannot be proven true or false given the different narratives is fallacious. Whether Mr. Peterson shot Ms. Pete is verifiable and has been verified by a court of law. Stating that Ms. Pete lied about him shooting her is therefore verifiable and can be proven false. Tellingly, defendant fails to cite a single authority supporting her argument that it is an opinion or hyperbole to say someone perjured herself at trial. That is because the law is definitively to the contrary. In fact, defendant misleadingly cites Turner v. Wells, a case that contradicts her own argument. The Turner court observed one can determine with resort to empirical proof whether a plaintiff perjured himself in a judicial proceeding. Indeed, in Milkovich, the Supreme Court held that the connotation that petitioner committed perjury is sufficiently factual to be susceptible of being proved true or false based on a core objective evidence and is certainly verifiable with evidence adduced from the transcripts and witnesses present at the hearing. Numerous other cases have held similarly as it pertains to both perjury and telling lies more generally. That's crazy. Even your own references are contradicting yourself. That's wild. Let's see here. Pearson v. National Institute for Lab, denying motion to dismiss where defendants accuse plaintiff of lying to a court because such accusations are neither constitutionally protected opinion nor rhetorical hyperbole because they are capable of being proven false. That's interesting. So when you come out and definitively state your opinion, if it can be proven false, they can still open up a defamation case on you. Again, these are things that I think more content creators need to be taking heed to, not just YouTubers, but also on TikTok or Instagram, where you're just kind of freeballing your opinion based on stuff that's in front of us in the social media realm. I think we all got to be a little bit more careful with how we use our tongues and mouths on certain things, because when we look at the Cardi B's, when we look at the Megan Thee Stallions, when we look at even Nicki Minaj versus Nosy Ho, there seems to be a consistent precedent being set that if you're using your platform in a way that disparages people to a certain degree based on whatever your opinion is founded upon, you're putting yourself at liability. So whether or not that's right or freedom of speech or whatever you want to call it, freedom of speech only protects so much. I'll continue though. Defendant's attempts to transform her statements into opinions by parsing the language she used similarly fail. To start, she attempts to lessen the defamatory impact of a statement that she conspicuously omits to even quote, wherein she stated, "At the end of the day, a bitch lying on somebody is low down. Yes, she got hurt and that's cool, but how did you get hurt? How? And what are the circumstances and what after that? So bitch, if you think I'm finna be sitting up here boo-hooing for a bitch that played up in y'all face, Not mine, because I always said her ass was lying. Bitch, I don't. You think I feel sorry for the bitch? I don't. The fuck? A bitch with my nigga? I'ma slap. Whoa, 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 whoa. A bitch fuck with my nigga? I'ma slap that hoe, and whatever comes after it, comes after it. What I question is, when and or how did you become so close to a Tory Lanez that you would be willing to slap somebody over him? Anyway, plainly, readers would understand defendant to have accused Miss Pete of lying about whether she was hurt as a result of Mr. Peterson shooting her. Ironically, despite not quoting the post herself, defendant claims Miss Pete did not quote the entire post, referring to a 23-page transcript of a live stream she attaches as Exhibit A1 to the unsworn declaration of Charkinta Griley. But nothing about the transcript undermines plaintiff's claim, and in any event, it is not even properly considered on a motion to dismiss. Generally, courts do not consider anything beyond the face of the complaint and documents attached thereto when ruling on a motion to dismiss. While documents referenced in the complaint may be considered as attachments to a motion to dismiss, this narrow exception applies only when its contents are not in dispute. Here, Ms. Pete objects to the authenticity of the transcript exhibits because they were generated by artificial intelligence and supported by unsworn declarations. Remember that AI shit Milagro had in her damn motion to dismiss? They say, man, get that shit out of here. As such, the court should not consider them on this motion. You and your AI transcriptions. Even considering defendant's argument, however, she fails to show that anything in the 23 pages of the transcript alters the clear defamatory meaning of her accusation that Miss Pete lied. For instance, defendant claims the transcript shows she was discussing an article published by NBC, but fails to explain why that matters. The NBC article is not in the record nor reference to the FAC, and while the transcript references the article, defendant does not discuss its contents in a way that would show she disclosed the factual basis for her defamatory assertions regarding Miss Pete. Instead, the transcript reflects defendant disavowing the article, stating, "I hate that you lied, and that's just that. I don't give a fuck about that NBC article." Oh my goodness. How are you going to use the NBC article as your protection, and in the transcript, you got your own quote saying, "I don't give a fuck about that article"? Ma'am, you still have time to fire your representation. I don't know how much it would help you to find new representation, or maybe it wouldn't because you may not have the finances to secure somebody in such a short span of time. But you and Tory are getting your asses railroaded by this Unite the People, I must say. Do I feel sorry for you? No. But I hate to see it nonetheless. Defendant then claims in a conclusory manner, without citing any specific passages, that the transcript reflects her discussing her opinion and conclusions based on her observations of what happened at trial and testimony that suggested that some of the witnesses were drunk at the night of the shooting. But defendant fails to show why any of these unspecified passages disclose a truthful factual basis for her statement that Ms. Pete lied. At the pleading stage, the record is not sufficiently developed for the court to credit defendant's assertion that by observing certain witnesses were drunk, she disclosed facts that could lend support to her statement that Miss Pete lied. Okay, factors relating to the context of the broadcast and its audience are not before the court. This requires a more fully developed record. At this stage, the court concludes that blank complaint meets the plausibility standard for alleging a false statement of fact. We'll go past some of this. If anything, the transcript only reinforces that defendant led readers to believe she had an undisclosed basis for saying Miss Pete lied. For instance, the transcript reflects her stating, "So then this nigga gonna sit up there and say, why would she lie? Bitch, am I in the Twilight Zone? Did you ask me why Megan would lie? Like she ain't lied 50 times?" So they're saying when she asked those questions, she made it seem as though she had more information that she wasn't speaking on as to why she would be an habitual liar. Even if defendant's statements were considered opinion sounding, opinion sounding, the sweeping language with which she accuses Ms. Pete of lying implies to readers knowledge of undisclosed false facts and thus is actionable. Even if the speaker states the facts upon which he bases his opinion, if those facts are either incorrect or incomplete, or if his assessment of them is erroneous, the statement may still imply a false assertion of fact. Let's get past some of this stuff. The FAC likewise sufficiently alleges that the defendant made a false statement of fact in stating, "We know you a lying asshole, and you have absolutely ruined Tori's life," because readers would reasonably interpret the statement as implying Ms. Pete lied regarding her claims against Mr. Peterson. Defendant claims, again relying on a transcript that cannot be considered for the same reasons above, Superad 8, that plaintiff omits a later statement where defendant says, "You understand, you ain't a solid bitch in that regard. Then you lied on set. You just don't tell the truth." But that statement does nothing to alter the meaning of the statement alleged in the FAC. Instead, defendant asserts in conclusory fashion that she made a stream of personal opinions and reactions expressed in confrontational tone, but fails to demonstrate that her direct and forceful statement, "We know you a lying asshole," would be interpreted as opinion. The same is true of her statement asserting that Ms. Pete is a non-credible witness, which is an assertion of fact, because readers would understand she was tying that assertion to Ms. Pete's testimony against Mr. Peterson and suggesting that Ms. Pete lied about the shooting. And defendant's statement that it has never been a fact that Mr. Peterson shot Ms. Pete and Mr. Peterson is behind bars presumed guilty is likewise a false assertion of fact reasonably understood to her audience as suggesting that Ms. Pete manufactured false testimony against Mr. Peterson. The FAC also sufficiently alleges that defendant made a false statement of fact in stating, "Was Megan Thee Stallion caught trying to deceive the courts again?" Emphasis added. Defendant claims the statement is hyperbole, but there is nothing loose or figurative about her statement. That's true. That the statement is in the form of a question does not make it hyperbole or not defamatory, particularly given that the question contains a factual predicate, namely that Miss Pete has deceived the courts previously. Defendant also claims her statement is opinion because she refers to another litigant's pleading claiming plaintiff wrongly contested venue. But nothing about that litigation serves as a discourse of a factual basis to say Miss Pete deceived the courts again, i.e. for a second time, which given the context, readers would reasonably assume is a reference to Miss Pete's testimony against Mr. Peterson. Finally, although defendant briefly argues her statements are substantially true and thus not actionable, this half-baked argument likewise fails. She asserts that the fact they say half-baked in a legal statement is hilarious. She asserts that it was widely reported that plaintiff gave inconsistent statements to the police and admitted on national television that she lied about her sexual relationship with Mr. Peterson. These assertions are beyond the four corners of the FAC and may not be considered on this motion. And they have nothing to do with the statements that are at issue, which accuse Ms. Pete of lying about whether Mr. Peterson shot her, not about whether she made inconsistent statements elsewhere or lied about her sexual relationship. That's a smart defense. Because basically it's saying just because she may have lied about whether or not she had sex with him, that doesn't mean that she automatically lied on the stand or lied about the shooting taking place. But, of course, there's some people out there that feel because she may have lied about that, then nothing out of her mouth is worthy of being trusted. Right? We've seen that many times. In any event, whether an alleged defamatory statement is substantially true is a question of fact, not susceptible to resolution on a pleading motion where the evidence of truth is beyond the complaint's four corners. And again, all of what she is saying, as in Milagro, is easily debunked because Tori is serving prison time for shooting this woman. She received the proper medical attention. They found bullets in her feet. She was shot. For the people saying, he's doing time because Kelsey did it. Well, tell him to come out and tell people that's who did it, if that's the story. If that's not the story, then you have to leave it where it's at. Otherwise, tell that man to publicly state Kelsey was the one who shot Megan Thee Stallion, not me. And then they can have another investigation into those terms. If he's not going to do it, and y'all are the ones still out here saying it, there is no legal track record to follow. I shall continue. Defamatory statements accusing Miss Pete of being incapacitated are false assertions of fact. Defendant's defamatory statements asserting that Miss Pete is mentally incapacitated such that she is in need of a legal guardian are also false assertions of fact. A printed statement which derogates the plaintiff's mental condition has been held to be libelous. Defendant's attempts to liken her comments to mere insults like stupid, moron, and wacko are belied by the actual words she used. This is a quote. What is Megan's mental status? Does she have a guardian or not? Has she been listed as a capable person? Has she ever been deemed like legally like anything of the nature? Anything of the sort? Emphasis added. Defendant also stated that an individual named T. Ferris is her guardian and that defendant realized MTS, Megan Thee Stallion, was slow and needed one, and so it made all the sense then. When defendant chose to publicize to her more than 100,000 followers the assertions that Miss Pete's mental status were deemed legally and that she actually had a guardian and was slow and needed one, she impugned Miss Pete's mental condition in a way that is concrete and not mere name calling or the use of unverifiable insults. Whether Miss Pete has a guardian is verifiable, and whether Miss Pete suffers from a mental condition for which appointment of a guardian is legally required is also verifiable. For example, Florida law establishes a procedure for determining whether individuals are legally incapacitated to the extent that appointment of a guardian is legally required, something that is verifiable with mental and physical examinations. The determination of whether the individual's condition satisfies the requirements for a guardian are made only after a hearing and a court make findings of fact on the basis of clear and convincing evidence, meaning all of those statements are untrue and can be proven. Again, that's what they're stating all through this, is that all of the things that Milagro is saying can be proven as false. And they're saying that she knows that these things are false and should know that these things are false. However, she comes out and publicly blasts them as true, or at bare minimum, just inklings of opinion, which then goes back into the cycle of, we can prove your opinion is false, therefore this must be something that you're being commissioned to do. Defendant also seeks to shirk responsibility by referring to the first statement above as speculative opinion, presumably because it is posed in a series of questions, but that does not absolve her of liability. The form of the language used is not controlling, and there may be defamation by means of a question, an indirect insinuation, an expression of belief or opinion, or sarcasm or irony. The legal defendant used is accusatory in nature and reasonably suggests the answers to the questions she raised. So Milagro basically thought that she was basically evading responsibility by asking questions rather than making statements. They're saying even with these questions, she can be held accountable. Defendant likewise fails to show that any of her assertions would be understood as loose and figurative hyperbole for which no reasonable person would believe presented facts. She claims that the context of the hip-hop universe licenses her defamation as hyperbole, but that is a factual argument not appropriate for resolution here, and which in any event does nothing to lessen the direct accusations of being legally and actually having and needing a guardian. Section C, defamatory statements accusing Miss Pete of alcoholism are false assertions of fact. And this is also something that could be verified, because some people would say, well, in the documentary, she did go away. But what wasn't stated in the documentary was that she went away to a rehab. She said she went off to a wellness retreat. Wellness retreat and rehab are two different things. One, a rehab is something that can be like enforced upon you. Wellness retreat is much more voluntary. You can voluntarily go to rehab as well, but the connotation between the two are very different. And um, again, a wellness retreat could easily just be something that's um, brought upon by an individual. It could be brought upon by a foundation, an organization, or just a group of friends can go on a wellness retreat, right? So that and rehab are quite different, but we'll continue. Defendant's defamatory statements asserting that Miss P is an alcoholic are likewise false assertions of fact. Defendant fails to substantiate her conclusory assertion that her statements are pure opinion and rhetorical hyperbole by their very nature. In a 3-day span, defendant took to her social media channels to brand Miss Pete an alcoholic, first by falsely informing readers that Miss Pete comes from a family of alcoholics, and then culminating with the statement, "You ought to be somewhere for your alleged crimes, drunkie. Why do you even speak? Like, does your liver even function well?" That's crazy. How you asking about that woman's liver? I can see if you ask that to Nori. Nothing about these statements are loose or figurative or signal opinion. They instead mislead readers to believe Miss Pete is an alcoholic. Rather than show otherwise, defendant then pivots to apparently arguing that her statements are substantially true by cherry-picking statements out of context from song lyrics and videos that cannot be considered on this motion. Once again, defendant is improperly exceeding the complaint's four corners to argue a factual issue that is inappropriate for resolution on a motion to dismiss. The FAC sufficiently alleges that the defendant's statements were false and contain no allegation that would support a substantial truth defense. And nothing about the materials defendant improperly cites are sufficient to show otherwise. In any event, the court should reject this argument as well. Section 3, the FAC sufficiently alleges actual malice. The FAC adequately alleges that defendant made her defamatory statements with actual malice. To survive a motion to dismiss, a plaintiff need only plausibly plead a factual basis from which actual malice can be inferred. In her one-paragraph argument on malice, defendant gives the FAC's extensive allegations short shrift and erroneously asserts that Ms. Pete must establish malice by clear and convincing evidence, but that is not the standard on a motion to dismiss. Allegations that a story is fabricated by the defendant is the product of her imagination is so inherently improbable that only a reckless person would have put them in circulation, and that there are obvious reasons to doubt the veracity of the informant on the accuracy of his report sufficiently plead malice. All right, so they're using examples of stuff here. Other federal courts have found that allegations demonstrating that a defendant relied on unreliable evidence, took statements out of context, and entertained actual ill will toward the plaintiff were sufficient to warrant denial of a motion to dismiss for lack of actual malice. Here, the FAC includes more than sufficient allegations to infer defendant acted with actual malice. Plaintiff alleges that defendant 1 knew or should have known that her statements were false. 2 continued to accuse Ms. Pete of having lied under oath about whether Mr. Peterson shot her with full knowledge of his conviction. 3 published stories about Ms. Pete that included preconceived, false, and disproven theories as a part of a campaign of misinformation and harassment. 4 published her defamatory statements as a hired gun for and as part of her conspirational relationship with the Petersons to gain notoriety and generate profit. 5 made statements so far removed from reality that they are inherently improbable, baseless, and devoid of facts. And 6 demonstrated an extreme ill will and disdain for Miss Pete. Taken together, the FAC sufficiently alleges actual malice, right? Because if you're threatening to slap somebody, clearly you're moving with malice. Miss Pete states a claim for a promotion of an altered sexual depiction. This is the deep fake part. The FAC also states a claim for promotion of an altered sexual depiction in violation of Section 836.13, Florida statute. A cause of action under that section requires 1, a person willfully and maliciously promotes an altered sexual depiction of an identifiable person. 2, without the consent of the identifiable persons depicted. And 3, that at the time the defendant knew or reasonably should have known the depiction was an altered sexual depiction. Ooh, they on your ass, ma'am. And this is a relatively new law or statute, if I'm not mistaken. Florida statute, the definition of promote under the statute means to issue, sell, give, provide, lend, mail, deliver, transfer, transmit, transmute, publish, distribute, circulate, disseminate, present, exhibit, send, post, share, or advertise, or to offer to agree to do the same. Now, if you look through that list of words, there's at least a few that can be associated with a statement like, y'all go to my likes, and you know that in your likes, something is waiting on them, right? You could say maybe not distribute, but circulate, disseminate, present, exhibit, advertise. Maybe not advertise, because once you use the word advertise, there's so many different definitions and so many different forms of advertising. Maybe doesn't work, but whatever. Defendant's motion ignores key allegations of the complaint, improperly argues the facts on a pleading motion, and misconstrues the statute. For instance, defendant wrongly claims that she did not repost or share the video on her social media, did not post it on any of her platforms, that there are no factual allegations that defendant shared or disseminated the video to anyone, and the FAC allegedly claims she only liked the video, which had been previously posted. Yet the FAC contains allegations that defendant did share the video on her social media and did post it to her X page. As the FAC alleges, when defendant hit the like button on the video, she caused the video to be republished and shared on her own X page under the likes tab, where the video could then be viewed and played by anyone who went to her X page. See, now this is the interesting thing, right? Because at the time when Milagro did this, likes were still public on X. Since then, your personal likes on X or /Twitter, as I prefer to call it, are now hidden, right? That was a more recent development that happened within the past maybe 6 months or so. But before then, your likes, if you liked something on Twitter, it would actually go into the feed where they would say, such and such like this post, and it would put it right in front of you. So that is a form of promotion as well. Not to mention the likes page that was public, where you could see the stuff that people were liking, which also in some way could be looked at as promotion, especially if you utilize it in that way where you tell people to actually check out your likes tab. That's a form of promotion. Then after causing the video to be shared on her profile, defendant directed the public to go to my likes, i.e. the like section of her X page, and that is exactly what they did with her encouragement, causing the video to gain popularity. That's a fact. Indeed, defendant publicly confessed to doing so, brazenly stating, "Be mad that I drew attention to it." See, this is why Milagro is walking around with her toenails in her motherfucking mouth. Because she goes on her little station head, she goes in her little Twitter spaces, and she talks and yaps too fucking much. And because she feels like she owes her audience an explanation for everything, she talks too fucking much. So even in instances where she may have a legal defense that could apply, with everything that she stated in all of these different sessions, more than likely, she's going to have quotations and quotes out of her own mouth that contradict the very defenses that her lawyers are going to try to use. Toenails and mouth, man. Defendant attempts to downplay her role by characterizing her conduct as merely referring or speaking about the existence of a deepfake video. Defendant did more. She published it to her profile and then told people to go watch it there, and thus admittedly drew attention to it. That was a quote from her mouth. In any event, defendant cites no support for her contention that the statute requires the violating party actually create and put the offending video into circulation, or that they provide a copy to someone, or that they post it online. This is a distortion of the statute's plain text, and tellingly, defendant does not even tie her conclusory assertions to the statute's text. The conduct alleged in the FAC and described above qualifies under the plain meaning of the statute's definition of promote as including to transmit, publish, distribute, circulate, disseminate, present, exhibit, post, share, or advertise, which she says, in a quote, draw attention to, which under that quote advertise is a thing. Nowhere does the statute require, as defendant asserts without substantiation, that she have procured, manufactured, issued, or sold the video or provided a copy of the video to anyone. So they're saying you don't have to be the person that made it, but you drew attention to it, so you're going to have to face some level of liability, not because somebody would say, well, if that means that everybody that liked it and shared it on social media should be sued. No, not the case. Because this particular individual, as in Milagro, she has 40 other instances of harassing content. This is only one of many. So, no, not everybody on social media that engaged with that video should be held responsible. We're talking to you specifically. Again, things to pay attention to. Defendant also improperly alleges the facts and does so in ways that are of no relevance to whether Ms. Pete has stated a claim. For instance, defendant suggests that an article published by Uprocks may have garnered more attention to the video than the defendant and tries to shift blame to the unknown individual who published and posted it online. But the extent of defendant's liability vis-a-vis others is not before the court on this pleading motion. Similarly irrelevant is defendant's contention that defendant herself told the public that the video appeared to be a deepfake and that plaintiff should sue the individuals who made it. Nowhere does the statute provide such an excuse for defendant's promotion of the video, and it is defendant's confession that she knew the video was fake that suffices to allege she knew or reasonably should have known the depiction was an altered sexual depiction. Ms. Pete states a claim for intentional infliction of emotional distress. To state a plausible claim for intentional infliction of emotional distress, Ms. Pete is required to allege 1, the wrongdoer's conduct was intentional or reckless, which with all of these different infractions, it's not going to be hard to cite intention or reckless conduct. 2, the conduct was outrageous. 3, the conduct caused emotional distress. And 4, the emotional distress was severe. Defendant only argues that Ms. Pete failed to allege that her conduct was outrageous. Defendant is wrong. Ms. Pete's allegations are sufficient to withstand the motion. The FAC alleges that defendant's outrageous behavior consists of 1, conspiring with Mr. Peterson, a convicted felon, and Ms. Pete's assaulter, and others to engage in a campaign of harassment against Ms. Pete in order to receive a financial benefit from the Petersons. So that's one of your acts of outrageous behavior. 2, knowingly spreading debunked and disproven theories about the facts of the trial. And 3, employing bot accounts to attack Ms. Pete and her supporters with hateful, derogatory, and malicious statements. 4, promoting violence against Ms. Pete. The FAC further alleges that defendant knew or should have known that Ms. Pete was susceptible to severe emotional distress and that defendant knew Ms. Pete discussed her suicidal ideations at the trial, where she attended, by the way. She, as in Milagro. Where the alleged conduct on the part of the defendants may not be considered outrageous when the victim is of ordinary emotional and mental status, such conduct may become actionable. We'll skip past some of this stuff. Although determining whether the allegations related to the outrageousness of a party's conduct is a legal question for the court to determine as a matter of law, at the pleading stage, courts refuse to grant motions to dismiss due to a lack of a fully developed record. Answers, and in the absence of any record evidence determining as a matter of law whether defendant's alleged conduct is actionable for intentional infliction of emotional distress would be premature. Let's skip some of this. Contrary to defendant's assertion, Mott at 16 Florida courts have allowed IIED claims to proceed past the pleading stage, even where the allegations in the complaint do not allege SA or physical contact. Ms. Pete, if given the chance, in any event, Ms. Pete alleges that defendant has used her social media platform to incite violence against Ms. Pete and would slap Ms. Pete if given the chance. Accordingly, the court should deny defendant's motion. D. Ms. Pete states a claim for cyber stalking. This court has jurisdiction over the claim because there is diversity jurisdiction over the entire matter. There is diversity of citizenship between the parties, and the amount in controversy is over $75,000. I've seen some people say, why is Megan only suing for $75,000? She's not suing for $75,000. $75,000 is just the minimum needed for this to be considered based on the way that they're filing it. So we don't know the exact amount that Megan is pursuing because she hasn't put a number on it. She wants the court to determine how much she deserves plus legal fees, etc. So $75,000 is just a minimum. Defendant's presumption that the claim is brought pursuant to the court's supplemental jurisdiction and that it has discretion to dismiss is wrong. The court has no discretion to decline to hear claims properly brought pursuant to diversity jurisdiction. With jurisdiction firmly established, the amended complaint states a cause of action based on cyber stalking because it alleges that the defendant, 1, willfully, maliciously, and repeatedly, 2, engaged in a course of conduct, 3, that involved directly or indirectly communicating or causing to be communicated words or images, 4, using electronic communications, 5, directed at or pertaining to a specific person, that 6, caused substantial emotional distress to that person, 7, serve no legitimate purpose, and 8, the petition must be sworn to some code. First, the amended complaint alleges that the defendant engaged in a course of conduct involving indirectly communicating words or images using electronic communications directed at Ms. Pete. Second, Ms. Pete alleges that these words caused her emotional distress. Although defendant argues that the substantial emotional distress standard should be looked at through an objective, not subjective standard, the case she cites for that proposition was decided after a full evidentiary hearing, not on the basis of the pleadings. Here, the court must accept the well-pleaded facts here as true, including allegations that defendant knew of Ms. Pete's vulnerabilities and purposefully exploited those vulnerabilities to cause her substantial emotional distress. Third, the statement served no legitimate interest. Defendant argues the cyberstalking claim should be dismissed because the court cannot enter an injunction to prevent libelous or defamatory statements, but in the same breath claims her statements are not libelous or defamatory. She cannot have it both ways. Oh boy. Further, defendant argues that there can be no claim of cyberstalking for conduct based on a legitimate purpose, but there can be no legitimate purpose in making harassment and defamatory statements. Defendant does not even attempt to articulate a legitimate purpose for her harmful statements. Wow. Making Hammer versus Sorensen inapplicable. So that must be one of the references that her attorneys put in her motion for dismissal. They say, again, that's not applicable. You've contradicted yourself again. The court should instead look to Strober v. Harris. In that case, the second DCA found that the videos posted to YouTube that contain statements, 1, directing viewers to approach and harass a female content creator, 2, daring the female creator to sue, and 3, soliciting monetary donations to anger the female creator were not done for a legitimate purpose and were actionable despite not being sent directly to the female creator. Likewise here, even though the videos were not sent directly to Ms. Pete, they resemble the same types of attacks in Strober. Defendant's statements are clearly designed and intended to harass Ms. Pete by calling her a lying ass hoe, like legally retah, a drunkie, and more. Fourth, the statute requires the petition to be sworn under oath. Ms. Pete signed and swore to the petition attached to the amended complaint. Therein, she pleads all of the requirements of the statute, including the paragraphs of the amended complaint relied on to meet her burden. Ms. Pete would be willing to swear to the amended complaint if the court deems that necessary, but the statute requires the petition to be verified, which it was. We're getting to the end of this. Defendant's motion to dismiss or strike claims for attorney's fees is improper and premature. Defendant's request to dismiss or strike plaintiff's claims for attorney fees contravenes the federal rules of civil procedure. Even where there appears no current basis to claim attorney's fees, a plaintiff's request for attorney fees is not redundant, immaterial, impertinent, or scandalous. According to Fed R Civil P12F, setting the standard for a motion to strike, and it is plausible that Ms. Pete may be entitled to fees if she prevails. Alternatively, leave to amend should be granted for the extent any claim requires additional factual detail. In the event the court finds any cause of action lacking factual detail needed to state a claim, Miss Pete should be permitted leave to amend. Okay. So basically, if she needs to add more information or context or references, she wants the court to allow her to amend her complaint further. We'll just go off of that. Okay. Conclusion. For the foregoing reasons, the court should deny the motion to dismiss in its entirety. All right. So that was just a long roundabout way of saying Megan objects to Milagro's motion to dismiss. And basically what Megan and her legal team did is they looked at her motion and all of the references, because, you know, we always see these references to other cases and other things that happened in the courtroom. They went through them and found all of the holes in the nature of them referencing those other cases, basically stating that based on what she did compared to what happened here, it doesn't hold up. So I think Milagro's in for a long month. I don't know how soon the courts are going to try to get this resolved. Right now, we're still in the phase of them determining whether or not this thing is going to move forward. But I don't see this getting thrown out, especially with all of the examples shown, especially with all of the foul language that Milagro has displayed, especially with all of the things that she said herself, trying to work under the guise of media when you've clearly stated that you're not media, that you're not a journalist, and that's something that you hang your hat upon. There's a lot of contradictory statements that would not apply to any of her references. So I don't think it's getting thrown out. And I think she's going to lose. And I think she's going to have to pay. But that's just my assumption. Let me know what y'all think of all this down below in the comments. Be sure to like and share this video. If this is your first time seeing me on YouTube, go ahead and subscribe to the channel. Become an insider. And I will catch y'all on the next one. Much love and respect, y'all. Peace.
King of my city and cul-de-sac. Coming out swinging like soldier rag. Leading my people like quarterback. Boy, I study this shit on my almanac. Had to get up and grind. Knowledge is booming, I'm here to apply. Came with the chip and the dip, it just single the mind. We finna do more than survive. I need my check. Spinning the block for the Gouda. We hitting the jeweler to flood out the net. We don't do beef for computers, I'm straight out the sewer. We come when you rest. Niggas be looking perplexed, so keeping my foot on their neck. No map, I trust my gut for the quest. With drama, I'm fully abreast. I was ready for years and they doubted me. All of a sudden they tell me they proud of me. I've been dropping these haters like calories. Cross them out, I came back with some boundaries. Stand for my honor, but too raw, no corner. Packing the stick with a drummer. Wanna catch my bad, won't fumble. I done came too far to be humble.